Hello, everyone. Kuno Schläfli. I'm working at SDC, Swiss Development Corporation in Bern. And before I start and explain what I do, I would like to ask you a question, simple question. Who has heard of SDC? Jovan doesn't have to raise his hand, I think. Okay, okay, okay. Online, certainly online participants. Is there anybody who knows SDC or who has had contact, exchange, even collaboration with SDC perhaps? We can't see that here. Okay. Looks like something more important. I don't know. Okay. If I asked those, yes, okay. If I asked those people who just raised their hands to give me one element of appreciation, a value they attribute to SDC, a particular competence or anything, can be negative, I hope for something positive, but it can be anything what comes first to your mind, what would you respond? Just what comes to your mind when you hear Swiss Development Corporation? Anything about their approach, their strategy? Please.
Mainly development and support for projects.
Development support of projects, okay. The activities, that's what we mainly do. Anything on a bit more appreciative or maybe also critically appreciative? Formal, okay.
More appreciative. You are very generous with your support.
Okay.
Important positive point, really individualized support and true partnership, including encouraging connections among the different organizations they're partnering with.
Okay.
That's from your team. No, it's not mine.
It's from my team. I hope not. I didn't instruct anybody. Thank you very much. Okay. Maybe those who know SDC a little bit better have heard or know that about 8 years ago, SDC has undergone a reorganization. And it was decided to eliminate the thematic domain. The thematic domain was composed of different divisions dealing with thematic issues like social development, environment, agriculture, income generation, etc. And that was abolished. And to replace the thematic domain and activities, we created 11 networks, thematic networks. There is a network on decentralization, local governments, a network on gender, a network on disaster risk reduction. 11 networks where everybody was invited who was a semi-specialist in the administration concerned with a specific topic. That means today in these 11 networks there are about 2,000 persons members, partly members of, some are members of more than one network, others are core group members of a network, which would mean they would have about 20% of their working time to invest into learning and exchanging among their peers. These networks, the members, stretch from East Asia to Latin America through Switzerland. They integrate half of the numbers of the network members are SDC staff, and the other half around are members of partner organizations, consultants, experts, etc. So it's not only SDC exchange, it's thematic exchange through borders of organizations as well, but linked to SDC topics, SDC concerns, SDC learning ambitions. Okay, now these networks, they meet every 1.5 years around, somewhere physically face-to-face. So it's quite an investment. Usually we have between 60 and 100 persons moving to a place, sometimes to Switzerland, but we have made in Aswan, we have made in network meetings in all over the world, Vietnam, etc. And we have had the experience, we have made the experience that actually online exchange is much facilitated if the people participating know each other also face to face, because there is a question of trust. We want that this exchange is not only dealing with best practice. We don't want to send around the world examples of what we do best and what nobody else could do better. What we want is to learn also from failures, not only to exchange what has proven in a certain context. So in order also to go into reflections on failures, difficulties, etc., you need trust in the community. Otherwise it doesn't work. And of course, online exchange will never stay secret or confidential. I mean, you know that your boss might read something you write into the community one day. And since most of the members of the networks are national program officers, people we employ in the partner country where we work, they work for SDC and treat relationships, partnerships, contracts with partners in their country. We have had as a major feedback from most of these national participants that they value extremely the fact that SDC is inviting them to be part of that thematic community and takes them serious with their knowledge. So that is actually something which was very, very common to all networks and to all origins of the people where they were coming from. This is important because, as you know, and it has been mentioned this morning by our colleague from WTO, that organizations are usually marked by hierarchy and structures, and communication in organization is also marked by hierarchy, and usually some people have the chance for certain reasons to have the floor, like me now, and you are listening to me, and there has somebody has taken a decision that it is not you who is presenting an experience here, but me now. So these are decisions, these are facts which give more importance to certain experiences, certain persons, certain functions in organizations than to others. And actually you can, of course, balance such framework conditions, for instance, through an excellent moderation like Pete is doing here, and the design of the workshop which you have developed this morning. I mean, what we have had until now was a very lively and very participatory process of exchange where everybody could participate. Now, in our networks, they are led by and animated, moderated by focal points. We call them focal points. These are the thematic experts who are in charge of moderating processes of exchange and learning in the network, in their networks. And we still have a sort of deficiency of dynamic in many of the networks. So people still wait until they get an invitation to participate into a process, If they are invited to produce a case study, for instance, it needs a certain motivation or a certain initial energy to come that things happen. It doesn't happen by itself usually still. And what we realized was that in fact we would like to get out of a situation where we make people react, where we want them to reflect on their own and to initiate their own reflection and bring it into with their own motivation and energy into the community of practice. So we have started to think how we could favor that, and we found the digital storytelling approach, which we tried out with an ambition to offer people not present in an important moment, to offer to those people a possibility to really express an opinion, an analysis, to bring something to the point and to introduce it into a community with a very strong weight. with a very powerful energy in order to influence the group. And we have started a few years ago with a first process, which was more a project-like approach. We made a digital storytelling process in Bosnia-Herzegovina, where we offered that possibility to members of NGOs in who participated in local governments, and they could develop stories and then confront their authorities with these stories. But I'm not going to talk about that here now. Last year, we tried to apply, or we applied that approach by inviting the members of our networks, 2,000 people around, inviting them to think, do I have something which I want to tell the SDC world, the global SDC community, and am I interested to participate in a 3-day workshop in Bern? We organized 2 such workshops of 3 days, and we had about 40 participants for the 2 workshops. We produced 34 stories, and these 34 stories are now on an app which I can take with me. I have all the 34 here. You will see 3 of them now. We have classified them in a certain structure and order. You can find them by author, by person, but also by topic, category. We have three categories: giving voice and visibility, reflection and organizational change, and evidence and change. So I think we should start seeing what I'm talking about, but I would like to invite the technical persons to show the first story. The first story has been produced by a national program officer, SDC national program officer working in our office in Kabul, Afghanistan. He is a specialist on education, and he has been working all his life in the Afghan administration. And when he was engaged by SDC, he had to deal with SDC procedures, requirements for documents, etc. And he explains what he lived, what were his feelings when he was confronted with that task and how he did it. I think it's this.
My story reflects open door policy, which I experienced at SDC Afghanistan in 2014. It was, in fact, the year that I joined SDC Afghanistan as a senior program officer to run education program. I remember that it was April 2014 when my manager asked me to start drafting a credit proposal on education project. That in fact put me in a critical situation, as I was not familiar with the processes of writing a credit proposal. I then referred back to my manager to get information on the requirement of a project document. My manager explained me in a practical manner about the way to make a credible credit proposal within the format instructed by SDC. It was not the first and last time meeting my manager to discuss credit proposal. I met several times while developing the document, and his door was always open for me. This made me feel more comfortable in the working environment and became motivated. I feel more at ease meeting my manager anytime in the office, discussing different subjects such as planning, reporting, and field visiting and external meetings. I learned that open door policy facilitates informal and relaxed face-to-face contact with senior managers, through which we share feelings, thoughts, and exchange information without worries and pressure. Overall, the situation made me perceive open door policy as one of the healthy patterns of organizational culture, as it gave me a sense of belonging and provided me with a space for knowledge sharing and reflection.
So that was the first story. Actually, the topic was totally open. Everybody could choose what he would want to bring. And I would like to ask you now to just reflect a minute or two what comes, what enters into your mind. What are your feelings about that story? If you think of what has he said, what has he told, and what does remain for you? Just a minute or so, think a little bit. Just think. Just a question, yeah?
Was the intention that you would invite people who work for SDC to show their criticalness? Because I didn't hear anything critical of what you said.
Yeah, okay. Can I take the question to when we have seen all of them? And okay. Yeah.
Quote, sit downs are good. Quote, intriguing, touching. Quote, open doors and access.
Thank you very much. Okay. I asked you to reflect because when I saw them for the first time, we saw all the 34 in a line, and after that I didn't remember anything, so I had to go back again. So I think it's good to just sit down for a minute and think of what has gone through your mind. So the next story, and we'll come to your question at after the third story. The next story is on, we classified it under evidence of change and evidence and change. It was made by a national program officer from our office in Sri Lanka, who had been very engaged in the after tsunami assistance to the population in Sri Lanka, and she took that experience as a focus of her story. Please listen to her story. It's also in a situation where this assistance has stopped now, and the office is closing. So for her, it's a review.
I still remember his smile. In 2009, after the 30-year armed conflict in Sri Lanka ended, Thevarasa finally returned to his village with his wife and 5 children. His house was destroyed, and he was selected for assistance by SDC to rebuild it. Recognizing his masonry skills, we went one step further and helped him set up a small business producing prefabricated window and door frames out of cement. We were thrilled to see Thevarasa quickly expand his business. Soon he was selling frames to neighboring villages. Eager to capture his accomplishments, I published his story in our Swiss Talk newsletter. I wanted everyone to read about his success, our success. A couple months later, Thevarasa committed suicide. I thought we had given him everything he needed to start a new life. I asked everyone, why did he kill himself? Nobody knew. Confused, I found myself reading up on the importance of psychosocial support, especially in post-emergency humanitarian assistance programs. I realized that too often we seem to focus only on fixing things that are visibly broken. Now, SDC employs psychosocial counselors to work within our post-conflict reconstruction program. These counselors go from house to house, encouraging people to open up about any problems and providing them with counseling and emotional support. They also link families identified as vulnerable with larger social support networks. 4 years later, I visited Tevarasa's house once more. His frames lay abandoned in the overgrown back garden of the house. But his story shall not be in vain.
So let's take 20
His memory
seconds
will
just to
always remind
get
me that
the
to make
message
sustainable
in.
change, we need to look beyond the frame.
Okay, then we have a third story, which I selected for that event here. The third story was made by a senior advisor at SDC, Ann Bixel. She's a social anthropologist working for SDC since she has started working, I think. So it's a sort of end of career reflection because she is about my age. And she has always been dealing with evaluations. She's employed by the Evaluation and Controlling Department in SDC, and I don't know how many evaluations she has mandated, accompanied, and tried to bring SDC to learn from the conclusions of the evaluators. And she had a very strong motivation to make her story on sort of the impact of her professional life somehow. So please let us see the story of Ann Bixel on evaluations, two phases of evaluation.
I grew up between two cultures. My parents are Swiss and I grew up in America. I've always built bridges. I've always made connections. I'm curious about people and I'm curious about what makes them tick. So I became a cultural anthropologist. I love delving down into foreign cultures. I love it as a way back to myself and as a way of questioning my own culture. We're so different, and yet underneath we are so much the same. When we transcend our narrow worlds, we learn from each other. Curiosity and learning are close cousins. What works, what doesn't work, and most important of all, why does one thing work and not another? Learning can be oh so rewarding, the spice of life. We have all had those light bulb moments of discovery when everything becomes possible, when new horizons open up, when it's so much fun just being alive. But learning can also be frustrating and scary. Uncomfortable truths might surface. I commission evaluations for SDC's directorate. There's so much about that job that I love. Every year, a new topic to learn about. I get to reflect on interesting questions. I get to recruit super interesting evaluation teams. I learn so much from them, they become such good friends. If we know why something's working, we can build on that knowledge and we can make changes, can't we? It does seem so straightforward, doesn't it? But just like learning, evaluation has two faces. Evaluations can be dangerous because they uncover things people don't always want to know. Evaluations can rock the boat and they can threaten the status quo. That is why I so want to establish an open and constructive process. I want to safeguard space. I want to create a chain of learning across all of SDC. I want to engender trust, and I want to reward people's willingness to question themselves and to grow. even when it's so uncomfortable. That's why I recruit core learning groups and management reference groups, and why I recruit a senior management champion. That's also why I endlessly hound people to be on board throughout the evaluation process. But often, even mostly, my evaluation process isn't working the way it's supposed to. Institutional fissures surface, there are power plays, turf battles, fears, insecurities, time pressures, micromanagement. Everyone's too busy, too stressed, multitasking left and right, just going through the motions and ticking off the boxes, feeling defensive and overwhelmed, and even scared. But I'm also stubborn. I'm as determined as ever to use evaluation to move forward, to honestly and courageously create a cultural shift, to generate and use new knowledge so that the decisions we take really do move us forward. So let's generate positive change together. Let's all be inspiring and visionary leaders for each other.
Okay, so we had already a question before. It's okay? Okay. So the natural question now would be, what do you think of all that? And the more precise question has been already asked. You hear only positive elements. You said in the after the first story. Is it still the same after the three of them? You still have the same impression? It's success stories. Very much so.
Sorry, we need the microphone.
Thank you. Very much so. The only one where I felt connected to was the second story, where the suicide of this unfortunate person was mentioned without giving more background, because that's real. I've had that experience doing field work. But the second story was extremely disappointing, to be frank. If she has been doing the evaluation, she said there are two. The third one. If she says the message is there are two sides to evaluations, I'm left affamé in the sense I was wondering, where are these two sides? She's only saying it, you know, and then showing us a fist and her jewelry, or her hands thrown up in the air. So from an image picture and from the content, I don't know what these two sides are. Okay. I'm curious.
Okay. Other comments?
Somebody online agrees with that.
Okay.
I was just going to say, to add to his point, if that's the case, then maybe you can turn some of these into a series where it's 1 of 3, video 2 of 3, 3 of 3, where you can address each one of those points.
I didn't really get the point. Why?
You may have a topic and there may be multiple parts to it, and a person's attention span may only be 4 or 5 minutes. So you break it into, let's say, 3 videos. Video 1 addresses part A. Video 2 addresses part B. So to address the 2 points he was talking about that he didn't feel he had gotten an understanding of, maybe you break it into it, take some of these videos and put them into actual series of videos.
Thank you. Okay, please.
Well, but I think I appreciated the way that you said that you left it open to everybody to just tell her own story, right? And I think this is a good way maybe to see the personal, approach of each person. What is the core issue? And for this, you have maybe another aspect of exploitation of the essence of these core questions, how to deal with this in the future. Because if there would have been a certain question or like some aspects, then you would have maybe limited yourself in the outcome of this storytelling. So everybody can see the SDG from his or her own perspective and give you more space to evaluate this in another way.
Thank you. Well, if I'm already here, please.
Yeah, well, thank you for showing the 3 different video clips. And I think it highlights an issue about using story and narratives as a way to engender critical thinking. Because, what to take one more step is to, besides telling a story in a historical context, one also have to raise the question and to say why it happened so. Because I think missing that, then we be reduced to consumers once again, and watching very beautiful images, nice sound, and then sort of become very placid. Sorry, and I think that's a danger, and I don't think that's the purpose. So I would encourage to take one step further to really address the initial intention of critical thinking and raise that question, so we can start.
Okay. 2 more questions?
2 more minutes.
2 more minutes only. Okay. There was a question here. Sorry?
Just a quick reflection. First story, Power of Unsaid. Open door. Send me a message that he's coming from the culture of closed doors. It was a very, very strong message of unsaid message.
Thank you, Johan.
Yes, just a comment. I had the impression that in the first and the third video, the video and the message were not as connected. The images and the message were not as connected as in the second video, and I think that's why the second had a more profound impact, because the video really strengthened the message. And in the first and third, I thought it was a little bit of a distraction sometimes to have the images. I'd say we're not extremely synchronized to the message, I thought.
Can I just add one from online?
Yeah, please.
So there was a general agreement with that last point, that the second was traditional and effective storytelling. And the comments people wrote down in that space for reflection. Don't just fix what's visibly broken, the bigger the front, the bigger the back. So people found the second one impactful in that kind of way.
Okay.
Was there a conscious decision to narrate it as a voiceover versus a direct narration? So a person actually speaking their story and we're seeing that and connecting with that person and their emotions? Was there a conscious decision made about that?
Yeah. I mean, the format was defined like that. It was not a video statement or the concept of the digital storytelling is what we followed actually with guidance, also with professional guidance. We had a moderator on that. Maybe one question and
last
then
question, yeah.
Just a final remark from my side.
Sorry, this is really just a very straightforward question, but who is the target audience? What is the intention behind having all of these videos really? What impacts are you trying to generate and from whom?
Okay, I think that leads to the reaction I wanted to give before. And these were, I mean, the task of my division is to stimulate internal exchange and internal learning. So these stories are not meant to be shown or screened to an external audience, in fact. And I mean, you may be considered as an external audience to me now here. But in fact, I propose that for reflection because I think we are discussing of processes which can be considered as sort of internal decision-making, internal debate, etc., be it in the community of the rights of children defenders or being in the World Trade Organization environment, etc. It's always a sort of community of people who want to, who engage in a certain direction. And that's what I would propose as an internal sphere. That's why I proposed this here to be seen. But it's true that some of these stories, like for instance the last one, to me is an extremely strong one, and to you doesn't mean not anything, probably, or apparently, because I can only tell you, I don't want to go too far into the intimate details of the process during the 3 days we produced these stories, but the participants were invited to bring their idea with them, to propose an idea, and we had already exchanges before they physically met, before the workshop of 3 days. And when the when the process started, we made a story circle of 10 people everybody presenting to the others what they wanted to do. And there were two reactions. One was, okay, from the professional side, from the moderator side, the reaction was, okay, your story is okay because it's your story. That's fine. But what you propose here, that's approximately the content of 4 stories. You should limit yourself to one topic and have that sequence of thoughts, etc. So the professional, the conceptual directive of how to produce a good story. That was one side of the reactions. The other side was from their colleagues. Their colleagues said, in SDC you cannot say that, or in SDC why don't you be a bit more explicit, or why don't you address the topic really? And then there was a very intensive process of discussion, debate, negotiation, how to say things that they can be taken, that they can be accepted, but in a way that they still trigger something. And this story, the last story, actually was in fact the most intensive, which gave us most of discussions. How to accompany the person to produce that story in a way that it is a positive story at the end, still a positive story, but hinting or triggering reflection on a certain topic. And for us it does. And for us it does, while for you, since you don't have the same internal context, it may not. And the story in the middle, which is the one which you can really show to a school or to whoever looks at SDC from outside, that story, of course, you can interpret it from very different points of view. I mean, it is a catastrophe not to be able to prevent such a development. And I know that in SDC things like this happen a lot, and we don't thematize them. It's very courageous of that person to put that on the table, because she was personally also implicated, in fact. So I think internally for us, these stories are really triggering something. And I ask the question to you, if in your context such a procedure could have a place. I mean, there is also a topic which was mentioned by you about the professionalism of the story. And there I just can say that most of these people were not professionals of communication and not visual experts. In the 3 days of the workshop, they learned how to produce a story, and at the end of the first day, everybody had a 3/4 page of a written story. That was the objective of the first day. The second day was learning how to edit a video, how to introduce audio into a video, how to record your voice and tell that story in a way that you can listen to it afterwards, and how to attach visuals, photos, or to produce visuals for the purpose. That was the second and third day. After 3 days, actually, everybody had a 3 minutes video, which was, of course, an improvised learning process, or a steep learning process for many of us. but in fact, and it's with its imperfections, of course, but this is okay. Time is down. At the end, I must say, the final impressions of the process among the members of the workshop participants, I never have had a closure so enthusiastic after workshop and more after workshop as we had among us at that moment when we finished all the stories and screened all the 20 stories by workshop. So that was really, for everybody who participated, an extremely valuable experience.